nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable, now being shown from coast to coast all over the United States and on YouTube. Our guest for this broadcast is a friend of long standing and probably America's leading expert on the myth of global warming. And Marc has advanced the truth about the myth of global warming while he served on the staff of United States Senator James Inhofe, and he's currently the head of an organization called Climate Depot. Now, what in the world is Climate Depot?
I like to say it's very similar to Home Depot, except for all your climate needs. We have daily updated hourly reports of all the latest global warming news, all the latest scientists dissenting, everything Hollywood and pop culture is up to, critiques of the news media. It's your one-stop shopping for everything global warming. You're doing a research project, you're a congressman who needs information, you're a staffer that needs information, you're John Q. Public. We have it all. We try to make it climate entertainment as well. I try to have it entertaining as well as information.
What caused you to become interested in the subject of climate change, global warming, etc.?
Well, it started, back, actually, my first job out of college, you may not believe this, Howard, was working for you.
I believe it. Thank you.
Not that you did a lot of environmental issues at the time, but from there I went right to I went from Howard Phillips to Rush Limbaugh's television show for 4 years and did a lot of environmental issues there. Then I went and worked for
won't ask you to compare us.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Then I went and worked for Paul Weyrich and did a lot of environmental issues there. Eventually did an Amazon rainforest documentary. I worked for Brent Bozell and did a lot of environmental reporting there. And then I went for James Inhofe.
So what this boils down to is you can't keep a job.
That's right. Well, I went from Howard Phillips, Rush Limbaugh, Paul Weyrich, Brent Bozell, and James Inhofe.
Downhill all the way.
That's right. Inhofe's the furthest left I would go. So that's.
No, Jim Inhofe is as fine a United States senator as there is. I have a very high regard for him. It's amazing to me how Oklahoma consistently produces top quality U.S. senators. Don Nichols and Tom Coburn and Jim Inhofe. But I was frankly concerned to read the other day that Tom Coburn wants to ban tobacco. Did you see that? He wants to eliminate pipe tobacco, cigars, cigarettes, chewing tobacco. And this is not what a freedom-loving person would advocate.
Well, he came out one of the early endorsers of John McCain, and the most shocking thing about Tom Coburn, and I can say this now that I'm not in the U.S. Senate, is he supported the bailout of George Bush, which to me, he essentially flushed his entire career as a fiscal conservative, fighting earmarks down the drain with one vote. I don't understand how he did that.
Having said all that,
he's still a great senator.
I admire him. I think he's a good man. And one of the best things he did was collaborate with Barack Obama in putting on the Internet access to information about all federal grants and contracts, something I had tried to do for years. I tried to get Orrin Hatch to do it. He wouldn't do it. And Barack Obama did it, amazingly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's amazing that Obama, is that any other accomplishment you can mention in his term in Senate? Well, I don't know of any of it.
He and Coburn are buddies.
Yes.
They get along well. Coburn has a wonderful chief of staff who had a lot to do with his election. And I like Tom Coburn, but nobody's perfect.
Yes.
Including me, and including Coburn. So again, back to the point. What interested you in climate change? What got you into this issue?
Well, I've always been interested. In fact, back in the 1980s, I actually, as a supporter of Ronald Reagan, was always uncomfortable with Reagan's environmental policy as popularized in the media. This was back at the time I probably still watched the network.
Well, I was uncomfortable with Richard Nixon's policy of creating the Environmental Protection Agency.
That's right.
Totally unconstitutional.
My point is, I was uncomfortable to the point. I was uncomfortable thinking that I was pro-environment. I used to say I was a Republican, a conservative, except when it came to the environment.
The best way to protect the environment is to promote private property rights.
And I realized it wasn't until 1992, when the Rio Earth Summit came, that I had my moment of clarity, if you will, on environmentalism. And I started researching it. I remember Dixie Lee Ray, the former
great woman.
Nuclear.
A great woman. She was governor of what, Oregon or Washington?
But I believe it was Oregon. And
Whatever.
she went down to this Rio summit.
Great woman.
And was doing reports on that. That's when I first heard about the Amazon rainforest, the eco-myths surrounding that, endangered species. I started investigating this and then did a lot of coverage and work for Rush Limbaugh's TV show. And I realized that so much of what the media, so much of what environmental groups, so much of what our pop culture preached about environmentalism was bunk. And so that's what got me interested. As an investigative reporter, I started investigating this, culminating with the late 1990s, my research on the Amazon rainforest. We released this documentary in 2000, American Investigative Television, completely laid waste to the environmental myths about it. And we just didn't go through and make a bunch of assertions. We took the facts, went into the face of the environmental scientists, the advocates. We embarrassed them on air. We had scientists throwing stuff down on tables, cursing. We showed the viewer that this was not unfounded assertions we were making. We were confronting them, and we were forcing them to admit that these were lies they were saying. Shockingly, in 2009, January, the New York Times, the gray old lady who's looking a little grayer and a little older these days, came out with an article.
And a little thinner.
Yeah, especially in the financial wallet. Well, they came out in January of 2009 and admitted that for every acre of rainforest cut, 50 acres are growing back. The rainforests are reverting to nature as, surprise, surprise, people don't want to live in the jungles and they're migrating to urban areas. So what we have here is the New York Times, 9 years after this documentary where I interviewed the co-founder of Greenpeace, admitting essentially that we were right and that our science was right. And they actually had a quote in there from a scientist in the New York Times saying, maybe the rainforest scare wasn't such an urgent cause after all, save the rainforest. Which brings us to global warming, because I predict within 10 years, the same kind of things the New York Times will be forced to write, and there will be people denying they are ever worried about global warming.
And of course, the people pushing this idea have a pecuniary interest in it. Al Gore is getting rich because of some of his associations involved with the so-called global warming crisis.
Al Gore, yeah, he has an Alliance for Climate Protection. He's involved with groups that have invested $1 billion in 40 different companies. Al Gore went from $2 million after his vice presidency in the year 2000 to, according to Bloomberg News, $100 million plus right now. If we get the mandated government global warming carbon trading that they want, Al Gore is poised to be the first carbon billionaire. And that's what he's looking at. And it's not to say he's motivated by money. He's an ideologue, he's an activist, but he's also probably got a massive ego, and being the first carbon billionaire is probably something that has his sights set on.
Yeah, it's second only to inventing the internet.
That's right. Which, of course, he's claimed, yes.
Yes, but, you know, Al Gore and I had the same government tutor at Harvard, Marty Peretz.
Okay.
And Peretz liked Gore better than he liked me.
Okay. So had he liked you, you would have gone on to be the vice president?
He disclaims all association with me. He has been the owner of the New Republic magazine.
Okay.
He married a gal who owned the Singer sewing machine fortune, and he was able to buy the New Republic and do other things. Anyway, he has pushed Gore all along the way. So who in the Senate and the House best understand this issue?
Some of the leaders are, of course, Senator Inhofe, who, when he became chairman back in 2003, he asked the question whether man-made climate fears are the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. He was talking about the Al Gore vision of a climate crisis, pending climate crisis. In addition to Inhofe, you have people like Coburn have actually been very good on this issue. You have DeMint, who's been very good on this issue. You have Orrin Hatch, who surprisingly has been distributing our report on dissenting scientists of 700 plus from our committee report. In the House, you have Dana Rohrabacher, who's been a huge leader on this, Congressman Barton, Congressman Sensenbrenner.
Joe Barton of Texas.
Joe Barton of Texas.
Jim Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin.
Yes. So there have been many leaders. I've actually been very impressed with the way the House GOP leadership and members have been dealing with this latest assault on global warming, the British promotion of global warming solutions.
So Boehner has been good.
It's not to say he's been that great in terms of out front on the issue, but he must be doing a lot of good stuff behind the scenes. They're positioning themselves well. They're questioning the science. They're questioning the economics. You can't ever get past the science, because if the American people believe we face a climate crisis or an emergency, they'd probably be willing to pay a lot of money to solve it. The bottom line is, not only do we not face the climate crisis, But if we face a climate crisis, what Congress is proposing, what the United Nations is proposing, is scientifically meaningless, would have no detectable impact. So we'd all be doomed if we had to rely on them for a solution.
Mark, in the minute before our break, tell us about the Markey-Waxman legislation and the dangers that it poses.
This is a bill, but you mentioned it, Congressman Markey and Waxman, that they're calling it an energy bill. They're not calling it a global warming or climate bill. But essentially, it's going to set up a cap and trade, a carbon trading scheme in the United States where the government is going to essentially create a fiat currency out of thin air. And actually, there was some proposals to make it modeled after the Federal Reserve, where you're going to have an unelected board setting monetary value on this new carbon trading policy. But essentially, this is going to be companies that emit a certain amount are going to owe money into a government pot, and the companies that are beneath that emission level will get credits or incentives or benefits from the government. So essentially, it's going to turn the federal government completely in charge of what we exhale from our mouth. And one of the MIT scientists, in my final shot here before the break, he who controls carbon controls life. It's a bureaucrat's dream to control carbon, and Washington is a field of dreams right now. 4 climate lobbyists for every member of Congress. If they control this, this is exceeding anything anyone's ever imagined in terms of government control. We had a scientist invoke George Orwell. This is what we exhale from our mouth. It can extend into your home, what you extend your home thermostat at, heating and air conditioning, how many miles
As
you
Orwell
drive.
said, he who controls the past controls the present, and he who controls the present controls the future. And the danger is the future will come under the control of these misguided, misdirecting people in the climate issue. How much will if enacted, will the Markey-Waxman bill cost the American taxpayer?
Well, there's all kinds of estimates. Right now, the bill is fluid. It's going through all kinds of things. But what we're looking at is thousands of dollars per family, depending on the estimate, depending on the final bill. Trillions of dollars to the economy. I've seen estimates of $4 trillion, $7 trillion. You can get Bush's bank bailout, as abominable as that was, with Obama's stimulus plan, as outrageous as that was. Combine them, and you still won't equal what this climate bill will cost. In terms of money, that's not going to, the big impact's probably going to be cultural. Even the Washington Post said this is going to be a restructuring of, reorganizing of a life as we know it if this passes.
Stay with us. Our guest is Marc Morano, the leader of ClimateGate. Actually, it's Climate Depot, but in French it's ClimateGate. Anyway, Climate Depot, Marc Morano. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, listen. This is the greatest thing. I want to tell you something. Something's happening in this country. And I want to tell you, look around my friends here. My friends here in Washington, come over here. See all these great people? These great folks are here because they want to take the country back to the direction of the Founding Fathers and stop all this nonsense that's going on and stop this, immersion into socialism, which is happening. We've got to stop it. And every day we're losing a little bit of our freedom. But the answer is that the individual citizens can make a difference. They can walk through these houses of Congress. They can look their congressman in the eye and say, hey, vote this bill down. Get rid of it. We got a lot of work to do. And the first thing we have to do is get rid of the garbage and the attacks on our freedoms. This is it. So anyway, that's what these guys are doing here today to do. Yes! And I say, all of you guys out there, within the sound of my voice and the visual that this great gentleman has created, get down here and do your responsible citizenship by going and seeing your representatives and telling them, what you want, because this is your house. It's not their house. Yeah. Get in there and tell them what to do, and let's begin cleaning this country up. A big mess has been created in only a year's time, in 9 months' time, really. A big mess we have to recover from. We got to start working. We got to throw some people out. So anyway, I love this country. I love you. Go do your job.
Thank you for your help. Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable. And America's leading expert on climate change, global warming, is our special guest. It's Marc Morano of Climate Depot. Marc, what do we need to know?
Well, you need to know that right now, the U.S. Congress is considering a global warming solution bill that is going to have huge trillions of dollars to our national economy, thousands of dollars to the average family, a hidden energy tax that's going to further raise gas prices, further raise home heating, air conditioning, energy across the board, all to do absolutely nothing to global temperature, assuming that the Al Gore and the UN are correct on the science and assuming the bill is fully implemented, both of which aren't going to happen. In other words, this is, in Barbara Boxer, the chairman of the Environment Public Works Committee, where I worked for Senator Inhofe and the Republicans, will say we need an insurance policy on global warming in case the skeptics are wrong. In case, what if Al Gore and the UN are right? We need an insurance policy. Well, what the United States Congress is doing is proposing a bill that would be the equivalent of buying fire insurance on your home for a huge upfront premium for absolutely no payout if your house burned down. If that sounds like a deal for you, then the U.S. Congress has a deal for you, if that sounds like something you want to do. And I think American people, when this comes down to it, they have to ask their representatives very simple questions. What's the impact of this bill on temperatures? The answer, meaningless. What is the impact of this on families? The answer, massive, huge, thousands of dollars per family. And the next one is, why are you doing a bill when, and frankly, we'll get into the science here in a moment, but the American people are not dumb. Gallup organization, the polling editor, just came out and said Al Gore has failed. He's losing this debate. Pew Research found global warming 20 out of 20 among all issues. Rasmussen polling has shown a dramatic turnaround. The majority of people are skeptical now of man-made climate fear. Most shocking is Gallup poll, which shows that among environmental issues, clean air, clean water, trees, saving species, global warming is dead last, 8 out of 8 on environmental issues. Not all issues, but environmental, and it's actually in negative category. The American people are wholesale rejecting man-made climate fears. And it's happening in the scientific community. We have new peer-reviewed studies out. And this is people, when they start realizing what's happening, are going to get very angry. New studies showing natural factors are going to prevent global warming for another 3 decades. In other words, high school kids watching Al Gore's film today will be nearly eligible for ARP membership, age 50, by the time warming resumes.
AARP. Tell us more about what's happening in the government schools.
In the public schools, it's actually in Catholic schools too. Here in Vienna, Virginia, Our Lady of Good Counsel is a school. I went and spoke last year to a class that had already seen Al Gore's film. This was a 6th grade class. I went into this class, actually spoke to several successive classes, and I asked the kids, what is your greatest fear about global warming? They almost all believed it. Maybe 20% of the kids didn't at the time. And their biggest 2 fears in all the classes I've spoken to are they're afraid of polar bears dying and they're afraid of sea level rise. Now, taking those...
Sea level what?
Sea level rise. They're afraid their house is going to be flooded by the ocean from the melting glaciers in the Arctic and the Antarctic that Al Gore tries to...
Bobby Kennedy Jr. is putting out a mailing on the theme of Save the Polar Bears. You may have seen it.
I have, yes. Yeah. Robert Kennedy Jr., by the way, a big environmentalist, has called for jailing global warming skeptics. Yep. NASA's James Hansen has called for crimes against humanity. Other environmentalists have called for Nuremberg-style trials for those who dissent. Yeah. That just gives you an idea of some of the tolerance. But back to schools. You mentioned polar bears. The kids are so worried about polar bears. The environmentalists know what buttons to hit. Al Gore knows what's buttons. Polar bears are at or near historic highs. There are biologists saying that some of them, most of the populations are booming. A few of the populations where they're actually thinner, they're actually saying it could be from overpopulation. The biggest threat to polar bears was unregulated hunting, or hunting that had decimated the population. There is no sign that polar bears are under any threat. It's all unproven computer models, which Ivy League forecasting experts say violate the basic principles of forecasting. These are forecasting people who spent their careers award-winning. They looked at the UN climate models, and they basically said, this is bunk. They violate 71 out of 86 principles.
If any of our viewers would like to have you speak to their Christian schools, their government schools, their home schools, are you available to speak to students?
Yeah, I go around, yeah. In fact, I go out to different groups and speak. I go out and I just testified in the state of Louisiana where a man named Foster Campbell, who was a Democrat candidate for governor in Louisiana, lost as one of the state commissioners there, demanded to know why my testimony was not shut down. And he also said that any future witness that comes on global warming, they're going to swear in, because the premise being if you're sworn in, you can't lie under oath and you can't be a skeptic You have to be lying if you're a skeptic. That's how bad it's gotten. But yeah, I go all over and testify, give speeches. This is something, when you talk to the kids, by the end of my presentation, I think I had an impact. I showed a video, I showed them clips, I explained to them about polar bears, I talked to them about sea level rise. Sea level rise has shown no acceleration. It's rising, but it's been rising since the end of the last ice age, 10,000, 18,000 years ago.
When was the last time global warming was a problem?
I mean, it's actually, global warming is another word for good weather. It used to be called the medieval climate optimum. And that climate optimum, that's what it used to be called before this became politicized 20 years ago. And now it's called the medieval warm period. And by the way, the medieval warm period, multiple studies, peer-reviewed, showing the medieval warm period warmer than today without benefit of factories and SUVs. So that's another one. The Roman warming period during the time of Christ was warmer than today, according to multiple studies as well. So when you look at this, you realize it's a language game, too. The New York Times had covered an environmental memo. They want to change the phrase from global warming to climate change, and global weirding, and a bunch of other type phrases, because the globe, we've had...
Weirding, W-E-I-R-D-I-N-G?
Yes. This is, yeah.
What in the world does that mean?
That's what Tom Friedman, New York Times columnist, wants to call it. The idea is any extreme weather event...
He's a bad fellow.
Yeah.
He can't be trusted.
Well, I'll talk about him in a moment.
Yeah.
Any extreme weather event can be tied to global warming. Since the Earth, we've had no significant warming since 95, no warming since 98. We've had cooling by all temperature monitors in the last few years. We have predictions of 30 more years of no warming or cooling. You can imagine they need a new word. They can't describe. We had a Democrat Senator, Debbie Stabenow, come out and say, well, global warming isn't just rising temperatures. Well, that's news to us. So it's global weirding. What they've done, any flood, hurricane, tornado, drought, blizzard, extreme cold, extreme heat, they can now say, evidence of further global warming. To the point now where scientists, a professor in Oklahoma, a top Japanese scientist, have now come out and said they've been reduced with these global warming promotion to the level of astrologists. This is astrology. If you read your horoscope, it's written in such a way, you read it in your local paper, it's written in such a way, it's vaguely worded, pretty much anything that happens to you that day, you can say, hey, my horoscope was right, it predicted that. They've now become anti-science enough that any weather event that happens proves their theory. In other words, you can't falsify the man-made global warming hypothesis anymore. That's how absurd it's gotten. That's why scientists are jumping off this in the bandwagon. David Bellamy, a UK botanist who used to believe, one of the biggest champions of this, came out recently and said it's anti-science. The science has quite simply gone awry. Claude Allegre, this is fascinating, a French socialist, one of the biggest cheerleaders of man-made climate fairs in the 90s, now a skeptic. President Sarkozy is about to appoint him to a major government cabinet post to the chagrin of all the environmentalists. Here's a man who says Al Gore's Nobel Prize was a political gimmick and Al Gore's film was filled with nonsense. He's an award-winning geophysicist, was a believer, now a skeptic, now going to be a major player in French government. Times are changing.
Stay with us. When we come back after these messages, Marc Morano will tell you how you can become an expert on climate weirding, whatever it is they call it. Global weirding. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm United States Representative Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan's 11th Congressional District. As we enter a new millennium of hope and peril, with so many problems besetting our country and yet so many opportunities before us, it is oftentimes tempting to think that your voice doesn't matter. What can one person do to make a difference in the life of their community and their country? Well, the first thing you can do is to contact your legislator. You are one of the sovereign citizens of the United States. You elect your servants to work for you in Congress. Let them know what you think. Send them a letter, send them an email, call them on the phone. Your voice matters, because if you don't raise your voice in the interest of our free republic, who will?
My name is Walter Jones. I represent the 3rd Congressional District in North Carolina, the home of Camp Lejeune Marine Base. And I'm pleased to be here today to encourage the American people to remember that their voices need to be heard by those of us in Washington, D.C., both the House side and the Senate side, that there are too many issues facing this country. There'll be a new president in 2009, and we need to let our voices be heard. From immigration issues to terrorism to the fact that this country's debt, we owe China over $900 billion. But I want those people that might be seeing this interview to know that we, the American people, with the help of God, we can change the direction of this nation. Just like the American people did on the issue of amnesty when it was before the Senate. They made telephone calls, they sent faxes, emails, and they wrote letters, and they said to the Senate, do not pass this amnesty bill, and it was killed.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable. If you're interested in the kinds of issues we discuss on Conservative Roundtable, please check out our website, www.conservativeusa.org. If you want some literature free of charge, fax me your contact information. 703-281-4108 is our fax number, or you can snail mail me at TCC, the Conservative Caucus, 450 Maple Avenue East, Vienna, Virginia, 22180. Mark, you've got about a minute and a half for last words. How are you going to use the time?
Well, okay, I'll just sum up by saying scientifically, this movement is collapsing, the man-made global warming fear movement. Al Gore knows it. He actually admitted last fall that he's failed badly. Scientific conferences, 2/3 are being, of these conferences, big Olympic geologic events in Norway last summer, overrun with global warming skeptic scientists. Japan, 90% of scientists, according to a survey rejecting the UN science, surveying Canadian scientists, it's collapsing.
How do people get in touch with you?
They get in touch with me. It's climatedepot.com. They go Morano at climatedepot.com. And the bottom line is, don't ever underestimate Congress's ability to offer non-solutions to problems that don't exist.
And if people contact you, you'll give them facts. Give them facts.
Yes, if they go to my website, they can find a fact sheet on the Arctic, Greenland, Antarctica, sea level rise, global temperature. We're trying to put all the information easy to find, and we also have information on what Congress is up to.
Marc Morano, Executive Director of Climate Depot. You're performing a tremendous service for this country and for the American people. Keep up the good work. We're proud of what you're doing, and we will support you in every way we can.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Conservative Roundtable, and thank you for joining us.